Crypto DLT with Mr. Connector. Be sure to subscribe. Hit the notification bell for daily content. Let's go.
Hey, it's Mr. Connector again. We've been discussing the gold standard in our live streams, and I ran across Nerdy's post today, NerdyX. If you're not following him at Sean S90X, you should go follow him. He's posting a lot of good stuff lately. And he's come across an article from Nasdaq entitled Trump and the Gold Standard 2024 updated. The gold standard hasn't been used in the U.S. since the 1970s, but when Donald Trump was president from 2017 to 2021, there was some speculation he could bring it back. Rumors that the gold standard could be reinstated during Trump's presidency centered largely on positive comments he made about the idea. Notably, he suggested that it would be wonderful to bring back the gold standard, and a number of his advisors were of the same mind. Judy Shelton, John Allison, and others have supported the concept. With Trump set to run in 2024 as a presidential candidate, some are again wondering if he will return the country to a gold standard. Speaking on the War Room podcast, Steve Bannon, Trump's former chief strategist, said he believes number 45 could ditch the U.S. Federal Reserve and bring back the gold standard in his second term in office. Wow, just think, guys, the United States could have the chance to return to sound money again. Let's read on to what the gold standard is and why it ended and what Trump has said about bringing it back. What's the gold standard and how does it work? Simply put, the gold standard is a monetary system in which the value of the country's currency is directly linked to the yellow metal. Countries using the gold standard set a fixed price at which to buy and sell gold to determine the value of the nation's currency. For example, if the U.S. went back to the gold standard and set the price of gold at $500 per ounce, the value of the dollar would be 1/500th of an ounce of gold. This would offer a reliable price stability. Under the gold standard, transactions no longer have to be done with heavy gold bullion or gold coins. The gold standard also increases the trust needed for successful global trade. The idea that paper currency has value that is tied to something real. The goal is to prevent inflation as well as deflation and to help promote a stable monetary environment. So we remember the silver-backed dollars. They were backed by silver that Kennedy and Lincoln tried to issue, and they didn't have success with that. And now with blockchain, we can turn gold into small increments and send them in seconds across the world. So let's go through a little bit of history. When was the gold standard introduced? The gold standard was first introduced in Germany in 1871 and 1900. Most developed nations, including the U.S., were in it. The system remained popular for decades, with governments worldwide working together to make it successful. But when World War I broke out, it became difficult to maintain. Changing political alliances, higher debt, and other factors led to a widespread attack of confidence in the gold standard. What countries are on the gold standard today? Currently, no countries use the gold standard. Decades ago, governments abandoned the gold standard in favor of fiat monetary systems. However, countries around the world do still hold gold reserves in their central banks. The Fed is the central bank of the U.S., and as of March 2024, its gold reserves came to 8,133 metric tons of the yellow metal. So why was the gold standard abandoned? The demise of the gold standard began as World War II was ending. At this time, the leading Western powers met to develop the Bretton Woods Agreement, which became the framework for the global currency markets until 1971. The Bretton Woods Agreement was born at a UN monetary and financial conference held in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire in July 1944. Currencies were pegged to the price of gold, and the U.S. dollar was seen as a reserve currency linked to the price of gold. This meant all national currencies were valued in relation to the U.S. dollar since it had become the dominant reserve currency. Despite efforts from governments at the time, Bretton Woods Agreement led to the overvaluation of the U.S. dollar, which caused concerns over exchange rates and their ties to the price of gold. By 1971, U.S. President Richard Nixon called for a temporary suspension of the dollar's convertibility. Countries were then free to choose any exchange agreement except the price of gold. In 1973, foreign governments let currencies float. This put an end to the Bretton Woods, and the gold standard was ousted. So what's the dollar backed by now? Since the 70s, most countries have run on a system of fiat money, which is government-issued money that is not backed by a commodity. The US dollar is fiat money, which means it's backed by the government, but not by any physical asset. The value of the money is set by supply and demand for paper money, as well as supply and demand for other goods and services in the economy. The prices for those goods and services, including gold and silver, can fluctuate based on market conditions. So what's Trump said about the gold standard? While it's perhaps not common knowledge, Trump has long been a fan of gold. And guys, we're also a fan of Ron Paul on this channel. The retired Senator Ron Paul has been trying to tell us about the advantages of gold for decades. So back to Trump. In fact, as Sean Williams of Motley Fool has pointed out, Trump has been interested in gold since the 70s when private ownership of the gold bullion became legal again. He reportedly invested in gold aggressively at that time, buying the precious metal at about $185 and selling it between $780 and $790. Since then, Trump has specifically praised the gold standard. In an oft-quoted 2015 GQ interview that covers topics from marijuana to man buns, Trump said, "Bringing back the gold standard would be very hard to do, but boy, would it be wonderful. We'd have a standard on which to base our money." That's what we talk about on this channel, guys. We're really into cryptocurrencies and distributed ledger technologies, and we keep a close eye on all the stable coins. But what are these stable coins really if they're only backed by fiat money? You know, what's that fiat money backed by? Nothing, backed by the government. So this is really good to hear from Donald Trump. Let's see what he says right quick.
Bringing back the gold standard would be very hard to do, but boy, would it be wonderful. We'd have a standard on which to base our money.
Yeah, guys, first you've got to have a good base currency. You've got to have hard assets, precious metals, real value backing your country's currency. Trump said, "We used to have a very, very solid country because it was based on a gold standard." And according to Politico, Trump has surrounded himself with a number of advisors who hold extreme and even fringe ideas about monetary policy. At least 6 people have spoken out favorably about the gold standard. Shelton and Allison mentioned above are not alone. Others include Ben Carson and David Malpass. The last two, Rebecca and Robert Mercer, eventually distanced themselves from Trump, but had a strong influence before that. Emphasizing how unusual Trump's support for the international gold standard is, Joseph Gagnon, a senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics, told the news outlet, "It seems like nothing that's happened since the Great Depression." Gagnon, who has also worked for the Fed, added, "You have to go back to Herbert Hoover." In addition, Money Morning's David Zillier has suggested that running the gold standard would require the price of gold to be set much higher than it is currently. West Shore Group Chief Global Strategist Jim Rickards has calculated the price would jump up to $10,000 an ounce, he said. That means the U.S. dollar would be severely devalued, causing inflation, and since global trade uses the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency, it would grind to a halt. But conversely, returning the gold standard to a low gold price would cause deflation. So what would happen if the U.S. returned to gold standard? Going back to the gold standard would have a huge impact on the economy. For one thing, it would make it impossible for the Fed to offer fiscal stimulus. After all, the U.S. had to have enough gold reserves to exchange for dollars on an as-needed basis. The Fed's ability to print paper currency would be incredibly limited. Well, that's been what's wrong with our country, guys. This endless printing of money. There's no checks and balances on this private banking system that we're pushed into. It's a monopoly upon us. Supporters believe that could be the perfect way to get the U.S. out of debt, but it could also cause problems during times of economic crisis. It's important to remember that because of 70% of the U.S. economy is based on consumer spending, if inflation rose due to the gold price rising, then a lot of customers would cut spending. That would then affect the stock market as well, which could very well lead to a recession or worse without the ability of the government to soften that blow via money supply. Well, guys, everything's been propped up with fake money already. All this money printing has set up an unreal fairy tale financial scenario that we're in right now. But for that reason, a return to gold standard would also expose the U.S. economy to the yellow metals, sometimes dramatic fluctuations. While some think gold would offer greater price stability, it's no secret that it's been volatile in the past. Looking back past the metal's recent stability, it dropped quite steeply from 2011 to 2016. Moreover, speaking to Congress on this issue in 2019, Fed Chair Jerome Powell warned against the return to a gold standard. Of course he did. You've assigned us the job of two direct, real economy objectives. The Fed has been tasked to maximize employment and stable prices. If you assign us to stabilize the dollar price of gold, monetary policy could do that, but the other things would fluctuate and we wouldn't care, he said. There have been plenty of times in fairly recent history where the price of gold has sent a signal that would be quite negative for either of those goals. As can be seen, returning to the gold standard would be a complex ordeal with many pros and cons. The likelihood of the U.S. bringing back the gold standard is slim, but no doubt the question will continue to be up for debate under future presidents. Guys, that's real money, gold and silver. No wonder the Federal Reserve doesn't like that idea. This is a responsible fiscal policy. And yes, the gold standard could hurt our economy, but we know that our economy is already overinflated with fake issuances of our monetary system. So I say the level playing field is the fairest way. All the countries are going to be competing on the level playing field. And guys, I say let the chips fall where they may. Thanks for tuning into the video. Give me a like if you could, and if you're new, subscribe to the channel. I try to bring new content every day, guys. Take care. Mr. Connector out.